You're inside your cave, 40,000 years ago, and it's mid-afternoon. The sun is high, there is no meeting to attend, no shift to clock into, no deadline pressing against your ribs. You expect boredom, maybe hunger, maybe fear. Instead, you're busy. Busier in some ways than the person reading this sentence will be today.
Modern hunter-gatherer studies clock the Hadza of Tanzania working an average of 4 to 6 hours a day to meet their caloric needs. The average American work year now runs past 1,800 hours, not counting commutes, errands, or screens. Time use researchers estimate that industrialized humans spend up to a third of their waking life on tasks a forager would never recognize as work at all. Insurance forms, traffic, inbox management. Anthropologist Marshall Sahlins once calculated that some foraging societies enjoyed more leisure time per week than the modern office employee.
Nobody designed this. No ancient human sat by a fire and decided that someday their descendants would trade unstructured days for scheduled ones. This wasn't a plan. It was a drift. And figuring out what actually filled those ancient hours is the first step to understanding why we ever gave them up. The myth of the idle ancestor. Picture a band of 20 to 30 people moving across open grassland in what is now northern Tanzania. For decades, the assumption was that early humans lived on the edge of starvation, every hour consumed by the desperate hunt for calories. Then, in the 1960s, anthropologist Richard Lee spent months living with and timing the daily activities of the Kung San of the Kalahari. What he found upended the field. Adults spent roughly 2 to 3 days per week on subsistence tasks, and the rest on rest, socializing, and craft.
The mechanism here is caloric efficiency. Foraging environments, when stable, offer a return on effort, calories gained per hour spent, that vastly outperforms what most people assume. A skilled forager doesn't need to search constantly. They need to know where and when to look, a form of knowledge passed down and refined over generations. Lee's fieldwork became a foundational text in what researchers now call the original affluent society thesis. The implication? Leisure isn't a modern invention. It's an ancient inheritance we've been slowly spending down. The real job was knowing things. Now, picture a child, maybe 8 years old, sitting beside an elder who is turning a stone over in her hands, showing exactly where to strike it to produce a clean edge. This is the actual daily labor of prehistory. Not constant physical toil, but the transmission of an enormous, invisible library.
The mechanism is cognitive apprenticeship. Anthropologists studying contemporary foraging societies, including work by Barry Hewlett among the Aka of Central Africa, have documented that children absorb the bulk of subsistence knowledge, plant identification, animal behavior, tool making, weather reading, through years of embedded observation and imitation, not formal instruction. A forager's workday was frequently spent teaching, storytelling, tool repair, and social maintenance, because the knowledge itself was the infrastructure keeping the group alive. Without a classroom, without a book, an entire curriculum was carried inside conversation. The real ancient job wasn't hunting, it was memory.
Boredom had nowhere to live. Consider an evening around the fire, long after the last light. There was no scrolling, no isolation, no single person staring at a private screen. Everyone present is engaged in the same shared activity: talk. The mechanism is what primatologist Robin Dunbar has called social grooming through language. Dunbar's research suggests that conversation evolved as a scaled-up replacement for the physical grooming that bonds primate troops. But where a chimpanzee can only groom one companion at a time,
human speech allows a dozen people to bond simultaneously. Ancient free time was almost never solitary. It was structurally, unavoidably communal, filling hours with storytelling, dispute resolution, and the rehearsal of shared history. There was no boredom problem to solve because boredom had no room to exist.
The turn, when time became property. Here is where the story stops being about ancient leisure and starts being about everything that came after. Roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, something shifted that would eventually consume the free hours of every human who followed.
Agriculture arrived, and with it, for the first time, food could be stored, owned, and unequally distributed. The mechanism is surplus and hierarchy. Archaeological work at sites like Çatalhöyük in modern Turkey shows the emergence of dense, settled populations living atop stored grain, a resource that, unlike a hunted carcass, could be hoarded, taxed, and controlled by a few. Time itself began to be organized around that surplus. Planting seasons, harvest labor, and eventually, someone else's ownership of your hours.
This is the hinge point of the entire human story. The moment food became property, time became property too. And the 4-hour forager's day began its slow transformation into the 8, 10, 12-hour shift. The ledger we still carry. Now, picture a modern office, 3 in the afternoon. Fluorescent light, a spreadsheet open on a screen. The body sitting in that chair carries the exact same nervous system, the same brain, as the person who once sat outside a cave with nothing scheduled and no one keeping score.
The mechanism is mismatch, what evolutionary psychologists call an evolutionary mismatch between the environment our biology was shaped in and the one we now inhabit. Researchers studying stress physiology, including work summarized by evolutionary biologist Daniel Lieberman, note that the human body still responds to prolonged, structured confinement, sitting, monitored, unstoried hours as a low-grade chronic stressor, because nothing in our evolutionary history prepared us for it. We were built for a world of variable effort and abundant unstructured time. We now live in one of fixed effort and scarce unstructured time. The wiring didn't change. The world around it did. You're back in that cave, 40,000 years ago, mid-afternoon, no meeting to attend. But now you know what fills the hour. A child learning to nap stone beside an elder. A story being told that will outlive everyone listening to it. A return to camp with just enough food and nothing more to chase. Nobody in that scene is idle. Nobody is bored. And nobody has any idea that 10,000 years later, a single shift in how food is stored will begin quietly rewriting how every descendant spends every day that follows.